we have a major solar storm warning as Earth is facing a direct plasma hit with radio and GPS chaos. And according to space weather, CMP impact jolts Earth's magnetic field. As predicted, a coronal mass ejection, CME, hit Earth's magnetic field today, January 4th. The impact jolted magnetometers around the world, with the Canberra station in Australia registering a sudden impulse of 38 NT. It also ignited a G1 class geomagnetic storm. A G1 geomagnetic storm impact means that we have powerful systems, weak power grid fluctuations can occur. Spacecraft operations, minor impact on satellite operations possible, and other systems. Migratory animals are affected at this and higher levels. Aurora is commonly visible at high altitudes such as northern Michigan and Maine, according to space weather. Whatever exploded will soon turn to face Earth. Seismic echoes pinpoint its location in more than 2 days behind the sun's eastern limb. NASA Solar Dynamics Observatory detected shock waves from the blast wrapping around both of the sun's poles. This suggests a very powerful explosion, possibly an X-flare. Radiation from the flare was eclipsed by the edge of the sun and reducing its intensity by 1 to 2 orders of magnitude, so that Earth orbiting satellites detected only a C4 class event. This might... Now, what is an X-class flare? The largest explosion in the solar system. The systems get rewarded for their sheer brawn with fitting science fiction name X-class, made visible to us by sun-observing satellites. These solar flares are awesome to watch. Loops of solar material called plasma leap off the sun's surface and expand to 10 times the size of our Earth. The biggest flares can produce as much energy as 1 billion hydrogen bombs. 1 billion, yes. Scientists categorize solar flares according to their strength. The smallest ones A-class at near background solar activity levels, followed by B, C, M, and X. Similar to the Richter scale for earthquakes, each letter represents a 10-fold increase in energy output. So an X is 10 times an M and 100 times a C-class flare. Within each letter class, there is a finer scale from 1 to 9. Although X is the last letter, there are flares more than 10 times the power of an X1, so X-class flares can go higher than 9. As the sun approaches the peak of its 11-year cycle, expect more activity like X6.9 flare, which we had August 9, 2011. So that is what NASA explains to us concerning an X-class flare. The radiation from the flare was eclipsed by the edge of the sun, reducing it to by 1 or 2 orders magnitude. This might be old sunspot AR3163, which spent the last 2 weeks transiting the far side of the sun. It was big, and the last time we saw it in December. It may have grown even bigger since then, and we have to stay tuned about what will be coming from this. So yes, we have the Earth facing direct plasma hit from the sun, the CME, space weather event associated with a powerful explosion on the far side of the sun, also expected to trigger auroral lights, shows at mid-latitudes for the rest of the week. A major solar storm warning issued as we face an Earth-directed blast of plasma expected to cause GPS and radio interference. And according to experts, the storm appears to be associated with a significant explosion on the far side of the sun yesterday. The European Space Agency Solar Heliospheric Observatory, SOHO, observed a very bright and fast coronal mass ejection billowing away from the sun's southeastern limb, one of the most important powerful forms of solar storms. Coronal mass ejections occur when the sun belches out a cloud of charged particles and electromagnetic fluctuations. Alongside this, NASA's Solar Dynamic Observatory detected shock waves from the blast wrapping around both of the sun's poles, likely indicative, space weather said, of a very powerful explosion, X-flare they believe, and they said radiation from the flare was eclipsed by the edge of the sun, reducing its intensity by 1 to 2 orders of magnitude, so that Earth-orbiting satellites detected only a C4 class event. Los Angeles-based physicist and space weather expert Dr. Tamitha Skov tweeted that the sun, on the sun, a new region likely to be named 3182 fires up a huge flare on the sun's far side. And she said it will cause R1 level radio blackout risk to rise up to 35% this week, S1 level radiation storm risk at 5% for the next 3 days. Radio blackouts are categorized on a 5 scale. R1 is the lowest with severity, and the U.S. National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, classifies it as minor. Similarly, solar radiation storms are also categorized on a 5-point scale by NOAA. S1 is minor, with no impact on satellite operations and minor impact on high-frequency radio in the polar regions. But Dr. Skov went on to add, an Earth-directed solar storm hits now, followed by fast solar wind. Expect night-side GPS and amateur radio issues, or possible to mid-latitudes through January 7. The aurora are natural lights, the shows generated when particles from the solar system, the solar wind, excite atoms in other Earth's upper atmosphere, making them glow. It's what we know as the northern and southern lights. And when we, in the northern hemisphere, know them as Aurora Borealis, whereas their antipodal counterpart is called Aurora Australis in the southern hemisphere. The aurora form curtains of light that follow the geomagnetic field lines and appear in different colors depending on which atoms are being excited. The two primary gases in the Earth's atmosphere are oxygen, which emits a greenish light, and nitrogen, which appears in hues of blue, pink, and purple. And last night, NOAA spokesperson said a coronal mass ejection occurred from just beyond the east limb, January 3, 2023. This coronal mass ejection appeared to be associated with C3 flare. The flare was observed in GOES SUVI solar ultraviolet imagery and appeared to emanate from an active region just beyond the east limb. National Solar Observatory Global Oscillation Network Group helioseismology data indicated a likely active region about 1 day or so from rotating onto the visible solar disk. Since coronal mass ejections can expand considerably during their interplanetary transit, this coronal mass ejection, the CME, was analyzed closely and monitored. Results indicate a passage most likely to be behind Earth's orbit January 6. A coronal mass ejection in September of 1859 caused the most powerful geomagnetic storm on record, one which scientists refer to as the Carrington event. The storm affected telegraph networks across Europe and North America, as well as the recently laid transatlantic link that connected them. Currents generated in cables by the space weather event reportedly caused telegraph poles, the pylons, to spark, operators to receive electric shocks, and some lines to fall completely. Other connections, meanwhile, were found to still operate even once their power had been cut, so strong were the electric currents induced by that storm. And according to a study presented by Association for Computing Machinery, ACM's SIGCOM conference, a solar storm like the Carrington event could have the potential to cripple the internet for weeks. Unlike Victorian-era telegraph poles, the fiber optic cables that make up the backbone of the internet are immune to the electromagnetic fluctuations caused by solar storms. The same cannot be said, however, for the signal boosters that are dotted along the undersea cables in order to maintain connections over long distances. And being underwater, not only are these long-distance cables more vulnerable to the impacts of space weather, but they're also inherently harder to access for repairs. Astrophysicists predict that there is a 1.6 to 12% chance a solar storm powerful enough to cause catastrophic disruption in modern society will strike the Earth in the next 10 years. So that's a very short time. This is by Express UK Ian Randall. Please leave your comments. Thank you for your support. Kindly support my Patreon account. The daily posts are 5 videos daily, and they are totally different from what I have on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for your support and that you find all my content so interesting. You'll find the Patreon account details in the description box.